March 1942, Port Moresby, New Guinea. The air was so thick with moisture you could almost drink it. Soldiers wiped sweat from their faces every few minutes, but it did no good. The heat never stopped, neither did the fear. Intelligence reports had just confirmed what everyone dreaded most. The Japanese had chemical weapons, lots of them. Mustard gas, phosgene, chlorine compounds, stored in warehouses across occupied territories, ready to be deployed against Allied troops fighting across the Pacific Islands. The numbers told a terrifying story. When mustard gas hit unprotected soldiers, 8 or 9 out of every 10 men became casualties. Some died, others wished they had. The gas caused blindness that could last for months. It burned skin down to the muscle. It destroyed lungs so badly that men drowned in their own fluids. Even if you survived, you might never recover. Phosgene was worse in some ways. It killed faster. 15 minutes of exposure and your lungs filled with liquid. You suffocated while still breathing. Over 15,000 Allied troops were stationed across New Guinea and the Pacific Islands at that moment. Every single one of them had been issued a standard gas mask. Every single one of those masks was failing. The masks had been designed in England and America. They worked perfectly in Europe. The rubber seals were tight. The charcoal filters caught the poison. Soldiers could wear them for hours during drills. But Europe was not the Pacific. In the jungles of New Guinea, the temperature hit 35 degrees Celsius every single day. The humidity never dropped below 90%. It rained almost every afternoon. Everything was always wet. Everything rotted. Within 3 weeks of arriving in theatre, a gas mask started to break down. The rubber grew soft and sticky. White and green mould spread across the seals. The straps stretched out. The eyepieces fogged up and stayed that way. After 4 weeks, more than half the masks failed basic seal tests. Air leaked in around the edges. If gas came, these masks would be no better than wearing nothing at all. Military chemists attacked the problem with everything they knew. British experts tried rubberized canvas instead of pure rubber. It rotted faster. American scientists improved the activated charcoal in the filters. The charcoal was fine. The problem was the mask itself falling apart. They added silica gel packets to absorb moisture. The packets turned to mush in 2 days. They tried different rubber compounds. Some cracked in the heat. Others melted into sticky goo. They tested special storage cases. The cases filled with water during the afternoon rains. Every solution failed. After 3 months of experiments, the senior British chemical warfare expert sent a classified memo to command. His conclusion was simple and damning. There was no way to make gas masks work in tropical conditions. The problem could not be solved. Troops would have to rely on luck and hope. The Japanese never used their chemical stockpiles. This is when Edward Derrick entered the picture. Nobody expected him to matter. Ted Derrick was 34 years old, from Queensland, Australia. He was a veterinary pathologist. He studied diseases in cattle and sheep. He spent his time in the outback examining sick animals and taking samples from dead ones. He had never worked with chemical weapons. He had never worked with any military equipment. He knew nothing about gas mask design or rubber chemistry. He was a cattle doctor. That was all. But Derrick had been assigned to the Australian Army Medical Corps when the war started. They needed every doctor they could find, even ones who normally worked with animals. He was stationed in Brisbane, helping treat soldiers for tropical diseases. He heard about the gas mask problem from officers who came through his clinic. The more he heard, the more interested he became. He asked questions. He read the reports. He requested permission to examine some of the failing masks. The Army Medical Corps said no. They said it politely, but the message was clear. He was not qualified. Real experts were handling it. Chemical warfare specialists from the best universities in England and America were working on the problem. What could a veterinarian possibly contribute? Derek should stick to what he knew: sick cattle, tropical diseases, leave the chemistry to the chemists. Derek could not stop thinking about it. Something kept nagging at him. In his veterinary work, he preserved specimens in the field, dead tissue samples, organs, blood. He had to keep them from rotting in the exact same heat and humidity that was destroying the gas masks. And he had found something that worked: eucalyptus oil. Certain types of eucalyptus and tea tree oils stop fungus from growing, even in wet, hot conditions. Even when everything else rotted away, specimens treated with these oils stayed clean. The oils created some kind of barrier that fungus could not cross. Derek started to wonder, could the same thing work on rubber? Could these natural oils protect gas mask seals from the mold that was destroying them? It seemed like a strange idea, maybe even a mad one. But it was an idea. And right now, the alternative was no solution at all. The alternative was thousands of soldiers dying from gas attacks because their masks had rotted away in the jungle. Derek made a decision. If the army would not let him help officially, he would start experimenting on his own. He would test his theory. And if it worked, maybe then someone would listen. Within days of making his decision, Derek set up his experiments in a storage room in Brisbane. He used his own money to buy supplies. The room was small and hot. Perfect. It matched the conditions in New Guinea. He needed to recreate the jungle right here in his makeshift laboratory. He collected different types of eucalyptus oils from local suppliers. There were dozens of varieties. Each one had a slightly different mix of chemicals inside. He also got tea tree oil, which came from a plant called Melaleuca alternifolia. Australian soldiers had used tea tree oil for cuts and infections for years. It killed germs. Maybe it could kill fungus too. The first challenge was figuring out exactly which compounds in the oils actually worked. Derek did not have fancy laboratory equipment. He had basic chemistry tools from his veterinary work: glass beakers, measuring tubes, a simple heating plate. He started testing. He would take a small piece of rubber and soak it in different oil mixtures. Then he would put it in a humid box and wait to see if mold grew. Most of his early attempts failed. The rubber either stayed moldy or the oil damaged it. Some oils made the rubber crack. Others made it sticky and soft. He filled notebook after notebook with results. Most pages were full of failures. After 6 weeks of testing, Derek found something promising. A specific type of eucalyptus called Eucalyptus radiata contained a compound called eucalyptol. When he mixed this with compounds from tea tree oil, the combination stopped mold growth without hurting the rubber. But the mixture had to be exact. He spent another month figuring out the perfect amounts. 73% eucalyptol, 18% of a tea tree compound called terpenen for oil, 9% of another chemical called alpha-pinene. If he changed the mixture by even 2% in either direction, it stopped working right. Too much eucalyptol and the rubber broke down. Too little and the mold came back. Next came the application method. How do you get the oil into the rubber? Derek tried painting it on the surface. That worked for a few days, then the protection wore off. He tried spraying it. Same problem. He tried heating the rubber first, then applying the oil. Better, but not good enough. The breakthrough came when he realized the oils needed to soak into the rubber itself. Not just sit on top, they had to penetrate deep into the material. He found that if he mixed his oil formula into a solution that was exactly 4.5% oil, and the rest was a carrying liquid, then soaked the rubber parts for exactly 47 minutes at 28 degrees Celsius. The oils would soak in about 0.5 millimeter deep. That was the magic depth. Deep enough to last. Not so deep that it weakened the rubber structure. After soaking, the parts had to air dry for 6 hours. Not 5. Not 7. 6 exactly. If they dried too fast, the oils did not set properly, too slow, and they evaporated. Derek tested 30 different ways to apply his formula before finding the one that worked. He used scraps of rubber from a local factory, old inner tubes, rejected pieces, anything he could get. His storage room smelled like a eucalyptus forest mixed with a tyre shop. The scent was so strong it made his eyes water. But the results were real. Treated rubber pieces stayed clean and flexible for weeks in his humid test chamber. Untreated pieces were covered in white and green mould within 10 days. Now he needed real gas masks to test. That was a problem. The army still would not give him any. He was still just a cattle doctor asking questions nobody wanted to hear. But Derek had treated a supply officer named James Murray for malaria a few months earlier. Murray had been grateful, very grateful. Derek had probably saved his life. Murray was now a lieutenant colonel in charge of equipment distribution. In April of 1942, Murray took a risk. He could have lost his career for what he did next. He marked 12 condemned gas masks as disposed of in his records. Then he quietly delivered them to Derek's storage room. Nobody asked questions. Nobody checked. The masks were supposed to be garbage anyway. Derek treated 6 of the masks with his eucalyptus formula. He left the other 6 untreated as a comparison. Then he put all 12 masks into his humidity chamber. He checked them every single day. He measured the rubber thickness. He tested the seals. He looked for any sign of mould or damage. After 45 days, the results were clear and dramatic. The 6 untreated masks were disasters. Mould covered 83% of their rubber surfaces. The seals had stretched out and no longer fit tight. When Derek tested them for air leaks, they all failed badly. Poisonous gas would have poured right through. The 6 treated masks looked almost new. 0 mould growth. The rubber was still flexible and strong. The seals maintained 97% of their original tightness. These masks would still protect a soldier's life. Murray saw the results and made another career-risking decision. In May of 1942, he filed paperwork for experimental field testing. He did not ask permission from anyone above him. He just did it. He requisitioned 500 gas masks and sent them to Derek. Officially, they were going to be tested for tropical durability. Murray did not mention the eucalyptus treatment in any of his paperwork. Derek worked day and night treating all 500 masks. His hands were stained brown from the oils. The smell soaked into his clothes and hair. He could not wash it out, but he got the work done. Murray shipped the treated masks to forward units in New Guinea. The soldiers had no idea these masks were any different from regular ones. They were just told these were new issue. For 8 weeks, nothing happened. The masks sat in supply tents while soldiers went on patrol. They got rained on. They sat in the humid heat. And then the reports started coming back. These masks were not breaking down. They were still working after 8 weeks. That was 5 times longer than normal masks lasted. 5 times. Officers in New Guinea started asking where these masks came from. They wanted more. They wanted to know what was different about them. The reports reached Major General Sir Thomas Blamey. He was the commander of Australian forces. He demanded to know what was going on. Murray explained everything: the eucalyptus treatment, the cattle doctor, the unauthorised testing. Blamey could have court-martialed Murray for going around the chain of command. Instead, he ordered immediate expansion of the program. And then, in July of 1942, everything changed. Japanese forces attacked Australian positions along the Kokoda Track. They used tear gas. Not deadly, but it showed they were willing to use chemical weapons. Soldiers with Derek-treated masks could keep fighting. The gas did not get through. Soldiers with regular masks had to retreat. Their masks were already failing from the humidity. The tear gas poured right in. The skepticism was over. Derek's mad idea had just proven itself in actual combat. The numbers told the whole story. Before Derrick's treatment, a gas mask in the Pacific Theatre lasted 18 to 22 days on average. Then it started falling apart. Each division needed 2,400 replacement masks every single week just to keep their soldiers protected. The supply situation was a nightmare. 14 cargo planes flew every month doing nothing but delivering replacement gas masks. 14 planes that could have carried ammunition, food, medicine, or reinforcements. Instead, they carried masks to replace masks that had rotted away. The cost in shipping alone was staggering. The cost in reduced combat capability was even worse. Soldiers worried constantly about whether their masks would work if gas came. They checked them every day. They saw the mold growing. They felt the rubber getting soft. They knew. After Derrick's treatment was applied, everything changed. Treated masks lasted 90 to 120 days. Some lasted even longer. Instead of needing 2,400 masks per week per division, they needed only 400. The reduction was massive. Supply flights for gas masks dropped by 78%. Those freed-up cargo planes could now carry 340 extra tons of ammunition and medical supplies to forward bases every single month. 340 tons. That was enough ammunition for 2 weeks of heavy fighting. That was enough medical supplies to treat thousands of wounded soldiers. All because masks stopped rotting in the jungle. By September of 1942, the Australian military moved fast. They contracted 3 eucalyptus distilleries to produce Derrick's formula at scale. These distilleries had been making oils for medicine and cleaning products. Now they were making chemical warfare defence materials. Production ramped up to 12,000 litres every month. Each litre could treat 15 masks when properly diluted. 12,000 litres meant 180,000 masks treated every month. That was enough for every Australian soldier in the Pacific, with plenty left over. The United States Army heard about the results and wanted in. American commanders were facing the exact same problems with their masks. They sent observers to watch the treatment process. They tested treated masks themselves. They ran their own humidity chamber experiments. Every test confirmed what Derrick had found. In November of 1942, the US Army adopted the eucalyptus treatment for all American forces in the Pacific. They scaled up production dramatically. Distilleries in Australia and new facilities in California produced 75,000 litres every month. American industrial capacity turned Derrick's small-scale experiment into a massive operation. Millions of masks got treated. Every new mask shipped to the Pacific got the eucalyptus treatment before it left the factory. The British refused at first. British chemical warfare experts had their own solutions. They were still trying to make silica gel packets work. They were testing new rubber compounds developed in London laboratories. British officers believed their scientists would solve the problem the proper way, the scientific way. They did not want to rely on some strange plant oil treatment developed by a colonial veterinarian. That attitude lasted until January of 1943. A Japanese attack hit British positions in Burma. The Japanese used actual poison gas this time, not tear gas, real chemical weapons designed to kill. 800 British soldiers were in the defensive line when the gas came rolling across the field. Their masks failed. The rubber had already degraded from months in tropical conditions. The seals did not hold. Gas leaked in through gaps and cracks. 340 soldiers became casualties. Some died within hours. Others suffered burns and blindness that would last for months or years. It was exactly what everyone had feared. Meanwhile, 600 Australian troops held positions right next to the British line. They had the same gas attack hit them at the same time. Only 3 Australian soldiers became casualties from mask defects. 3 out of 600. The Australian masks all had Derrick's eucalyptus treatment. The British masks did not. The difference was that simple and that brutal. Within 1 week, British command reversed their position completely. They immediately ordered eucalyptus treatment for all British forces in Asia. Pride did not matter anymore. Scientific credentials did not matter. Results mattered. Dead soldiers mattered. The British military bought the formula and the production rights from Australia. They set up their own distilleries in India and Ceylon to produce the treatment locally. By March of 1943, every Allied gas mask in the Pacific and Southeast Asia was getting treated with Derrick's eucalyptus formula. The Japanese noticed something had changed. Their intelligence services tracked Allied supply shipments. They saw that gas mask replacement rates had dropped dramatically. They knew Allied masks were now working much better in tropical conditions. Japanese command had been planning to use their chemical weapons more widely. They had stockpiles ready. They had trained units. Chemical warfare was supposed to be one of their strategic advantages in the Pacific. Allied troops could not maintain working gas masks in the jungle. That meant gas attacks would be devastating. Except now, Allied masks were working fine. The masks kept working month after month. The advantage was gone. Intelligence documents captured after the war showed that Japanese command specifically discussed this problem. They saw that Allied gas protection had become reliable. They decided that large-scale chemical warfare was no longer worth the risk. If it would not give them a major advantage, then using it would just bring retaliation. The improved mass situation changed their entire strategic calculation. Beyond saving lives directly, Derrick's formula saved enormous amounts of money. In 1943 alone, the reduced gas mask procurement costs saved $4.2 million. That was just the direct cost of buying fewer masks. It did not count the saved shipping costs, the saved storage costs, or the value of using those cargo planes for other supplies. $4.2 million in 1943 was worth about $75 million in 2024 money, all from plant oils that cost almost nothing to produce. Recognition came in December of 1943. Derrick received the Order of the British Empire. The official citation praised his innovations in tropical medical defence technology. The citation was very careful with words. It did not explain exactly what he had done. The eucalyptus treatment was still classified. Enemy forces were not supposed to know the details. Only people with the right clearances could read the full story. To everyone else, Derrick had done something important but vague involving tropical medicine. He got a medal and a brief mention in some newspapers. Then everyone moved on. The war continued. Soldiers kept fighting. And masks kept working because a cattle doctor had wondered if the same oils that preserved dead specimens might also preserve rubber seals. That simple question, asked by someone who was not supposed to ask it, had saved thousands of lives. The number kept growing every day that soldiers wore masks that still worked. Masks that would have rotted away if Derrick had listened when they told him to stick to cattle. The war ended in 1945, but Derrick's eucalyptus formula kept working long after the last shot was fired. Military supply officers had seen what the treatment could do for gas masks. They started wondering what else it might protect. Radios broke down in the jungle. Moisture got inside and corroded the electronics. Optical equipment for rifles and artillery got covered in fungus. The lenses clouded over. Binoculars became useless. Medical supplies rotted in their packaging. Bandages grew mold. Medicine containers leaked. Every single piece of equipment that went into tropical environments faced the same enemy that gas masks had faced: heat and humidity and fungus that never stopped growing. By 1950, military researchers had created new versions of Derrick's original formula. They kept the same basic idea, but adjusted the chemicals for different materials. Some versions protected electronics. Others worked better on optical glass. Still others preserved cloth and leather. The core principle stayed the same. Use natural compounds that create a barrier against fungal growth without damaging the item being protected. During the Korean War, the United States military treated 2.3 million pieces of equipment with eucalyptus-based fungicides that traced directly back to Derrick's work. Radio operators in Korean mountains kept their equipment working through wet seasons that would have destroyed untreated radios within weeks. Soldiers kept their rifle scopes clear. Medics kept their supplies clean. Nobody thought much about it. The treatment was just standard procedure by then. It was written into supply manuals and equipment maintenance guidelines. Spray this, soak that, wait the required time. The origins were forgotten by most people who used it. Derrick himself went back to veterinary research after the war. He returned to Queensland and continued studying animal diseases. He worked on cattle tick fever. He investigated sheep parasites. He did important work that helped Australian farmers. But he was not famous. Most people had never heard of him. The eucalyptus treatment remained classified for years after the war ended. Even when parts of it were declassified, few people connected it to Derrick's name. Military documents credited it to Australian Army research without naming individuals. Derrick never tried to patent his formula. He had developed it during wartime as a military necessity. The idea of making money from something that saved soldiers' lives seemed wrong to him. He had been paid his normal army salary while doing the research. That was enough. He died in 1976 at the age of 68. His obituary in the local Queensland newspaper mentioned his veterinary work. It said he had served in the army during the war. It did not mention gas masks or eucalyptus treatments or thousands of saved lives. His personnel file stayed partially classified until 1998, more than 20 years after his death. The formula lived on even as the man was forgotten. Modern military equipment deployed in tropical environments still uses synthetic versions of eucalyptol compounds. The chemicals are made in laboratories now instead of distilled from trees, but they work the same way. They create barriers that fungus cannot cross. They protect materials from the constant attack of moisture and heat, and living organisms trying to break everything down. Scuba diving equipment gets treated with descendants of Derrick's formula. The rubber seals on diving masks and the air hoses on breathing equipment face similar challenges to what World War II gas masks faced. Hot water, constant moisture, fungal growth. The same solutions work. Tropical construction materials get treated to prevent rot and mould. Buildings in humid climates last decades longer when their materials are protected. Museum preservation systems use related compounds to protect artefacts. Ancient cloth and leather and wood can survive in climate-controlled storage because fungal growth gets stopped before it starts. In 2018, 76 years after Derrick's original experiments, the United States Army Research Laboratory published a study on protective treatments for jungle warfare equipment. The researchers traced the history of every antifungal compound used by the military. They followed the chemical lineage back through decades of development and refinement. Every single modern treatment they studied had roots that went back to Derrick's 1942 eucalyptus experiments. The family tree was clear. The mad idea from a cattle doctor had become the foundation for an entire field of materials protection science. The broader lesson cuts against everything we usually believe about expertise. When the Allied military faced a critical chemistry problem in World War II, they turned to their best chemical warfare experts. People with degrees from top universities. People who had spent careers studying rubber and poison gas and protective equipment. These experts tried everything they knew. They used every technique in their training. They applied decades of scientific knowledge, and they failed. They failed completely. Their final conclusion was that the problem could not be solved. Then a veterinarian who knew nothing about chemical warfare or rubber chemistry looked at the same problem from a completely different angle. He applied knowledge from a totally unrelated field. He made connections that the experts never saw because they were not trained to see them. His solution worked. It worked better than anyone imagined possible. It worked so well that we are still using versions of it 80 years later. This pattern appears over and over in history when you know to look for it. Breakthroughs often come from outsiders, people who are not constrained by the rules and assumptions that experts learn during their training. Experts know what has been tried before. They know what the textbooks say is possible or impossible. That knowledge is valuable, but sometimes that same knowledge becomes a prison. It stops experts from seeing solutions that exist outside their framework. Derek succeeded precisely because he was not a chemical warfare expert. He did not know that tropical gas mask protection was supposed to be impossible. Nobody had taught him the limitations, so he just tried things that seemed logical to him based on his own experience with completely different problems. We live in an age that worships specialization. We believe that every problem should be handed to the most qualified expert in that specific narrow field. We trust credentials and degrees and years of focused experience. Most of the time, that approach works fine. But for the hardest problems, the ones where conventional expertise has already failed, maybe we need to listen more carefully to the outsiders. The people with strange backgrounds who ask naive questions. The ones who suggest ideas that sound mad to the experts. Sometimes the mad idea is not mad at all. Sometimes it is just the answer that nobody was trained to see. Derek's story is not about eucalyptus oil. It is about the danger of assuming that expertise always knows best. It is about the value of fresh eyes and cross-domain thinking, and being willing to try things that the textbooks never mentioned. The next time you face an impossible problem, maybe the solution will not come from the world's top expert in that problem. Maybe it will come from someone who knows nothing about your field, but everything about something else entirely. Someone who will look at your impossible problem and think of it in a completely different way. Someone who will save thousands of lives because they did not know they were supposed to fail.